All right, folks, welcome back. So we are returning to the Mars mystery. Disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. And once again, this is the murdered planet and the mother of life. Water, water everywhere. Hancock states that in studying some of Mars's largest craters, you find evidence that they were made at a time when the red planet enjoyed a wet, warm environment. The Hellas, Isidis, and Argyre craters have low rims and flat floors, which scientists have taken as proof that Mars enjoyed a dense atmosphere and magnetic field. Martian craters ranging from 30 to 45 kilometers in diameter have central peaks like huge stalagmites. Hancock reckons these were splash craters. Planetary scientists J. Melosh and Ann Vickery say that Mars, quote, probably had an atmosphere with about the same surface pressure as that of Earth today, and a correspondingly higher surface temperature. They also theorize that repeated asteroid impacts decimated Mars's atmosphere. A Martian meteorite studied at NASA was proven to contain a few milligrams of liquid water, now kept on display in a sealed glass vial. Quote, subsurface water to a depth of 200 meters may exist on Mars at present, Hancock speculates. He also suggests that there may even be underground hot springs near the planet's core. According to Hancock, this is also evidence that Mars once possessed vast water resources, and there are tens of thousands of NASA images which can be used to support this theory. This evidence underwent intense evaluation by NASA's exobiology program. One of the strangest aspects of Martian geology is the role water played in the planet's evolution. Hancock states there is a lot of evidence of water-based erosion, particularly the extensive dry valleys on the surface, which are thought to have been created by extensive flooding in the past. A lot of these valleys begin in parts where, quote, the ground has seemingly collapsed to form a surface of jostled and tilted blocks 1 to 2 kilometers below the surrounding terrain, such as at the Chris Planitia, for example. In 1980, Dr. Leonard Martin of Arizona's Lowell Observatory reported 2 images taken by NASA's Viking orbiter of an area south of Valles Marineris, which, quote, suggest an extensive water spout or steam vent. Vincent DiPetrio and Gregory Molinar computer-enhanced these images, stating, quote, not only did we confirm Dr. Martin's discovery, but a circular compression ring around the center column indicates the cloud to be rising at a velocity of over 200 feet per second. Hancock points out that several large channels north and east of Valles Marineris converge at the Chris Basin and merge into the lower northern plains. They have streamlined walls, scoured bottoms, and contain teardrop-shaped islands, which he argues suggest excessive flooding. There is also evidence of flooding near Elysium and Hellas, Memnonia, and Amazonas. Mars's surface is full of valleys in the heavily cratered terrains that appear to have been the result of prolonged water erosion. The sudden end of a lush environment. NASA reports confirm that not only did Mars have a wet and warm environment, but also one that sustained intelligent life that appears to have been suddenly torn away. The major channel network in and around Chris Planitia is upwards of 25 kilometers wide and 2,000 kilometers long. Hancock believes this channel was formed by a sudden deluge, which gouged, quote, cavernous potholes several hundred meters deep. carving, quote, teardrop islands which measure 100 kilometers from end to end. This torrent of water traveled very fast, discharging millions of cubic meters of water per second. Michael Carr of the US Geological Survey argues that this was the equivalent of an ocean 500 meters deep. Hancock points out that another flood took place at Eris Valia, as NASA photos from the Pathfinder module in 1997 demonstrate that this channel was filled once with, quote, thousands of feet of churning water. Pathfinder scientist Dr. Michael Mallon states that a comparable flood on Earth, quote, would be the flood that filled the Mediterranean basin. Layered deposits of stratified sedimentary rock, sometimes 5 kilometers thick, have been identified all over Mars. According to Hancock, this not only proves the existence of a warm, dense atmosphere in the past, but also one in which liquid water could have survived for a prolonged length of time. NASA reports suggest that rivers flowed on Mars for hundreds of millions of years, and that there was even rainfall once on the red planet, the shorelines of Cydonia. So, the general belief is that humid conditions existed on Mars billions of years ago. However, Harold Masursky, is that how you say it, of the US Geological Survey has shown evidence of liquid water on Mars, quote, as recently as a few million years ago. Colin Pillinger and his team go further as their studies of Martian meteorites demonstrate that liquid water and primitive life could have existed as recently as 600,000 years ago. Hancock raises the possibility of a time frame even more recently, that a great cataclysm struck Mars and decimated its liquid water and atmosphere less than 17,000 years ago. Try 12,500, I think you'll find it fits. He cites David Scott of the US Geological Survey, who examined, quote, meandering channels, spillways and outlets, deposits and shorelines along the basins of Elysium, Amazonas, Utopia, Isidis, and Chris, which point to the former presence of seas and lakes. Vic Baker of the University of Arizona even suggests that a great ocean covered the northern hemisphere with ancient shorelines across the North Plains close to the Cydonia region of the planet, where the pyramids and face were discovered. I mean, imagine that, right? According to geologist James L. Erdovic, I think that's how you say that, Cydonia contains what looks like shoreline areas which even show signs of possible erosion and landslides around the edges of these shorelines. Hancock argues that if this is the case, then erosion features indicate that water was once present on Mars in considerable quantities, though the question of when is another matter. Quote, amid these layers is written the story of the death of a world, writes Hancock. It may not have been billions of years in the past, but the fate that afflicted Mars may not have entirely bypassed Earth. Understatement of the year, mate. The latter part of that quote may in fact sum up the fate of Atlantis, as Plato warned us long ago. And I say warned us because we seem to be headed towards the very same thing right now. And it's worth mentioning here, that the planet that was between Mars and Jupiter, according to Lou Baldwin, was a water planet predominantly. So when you're talking about a deluge, 12,500 years ago, which flooded the Earth and led to the fall of Atlantis, but also massively flooded Mars, which was a lot closer to the planet between Mars and Jupiter, whether you want to call it Lucifer or Tiamat or whatever you want to call it. then, the destruction of a water planet leads to the flooding of planets which are close by. It fits. It all fits. Or was it Lou Baldwin who said that man was a water planet, or was it Michael Tazarian, or was it both of them? I'm not entirely sure because I'm going off memory, but I know that Michael Tazarian said it was like a second sun because it was mostly a water planet, so it reflected light quite a lot. I seem to remember that in one of his old Red Ice radio interviews. I can't remember if Lou Baldwin says it was a predominantly water planet or not. But one of the two. I think I'm leaning that it was Michael Desarian who said it. So when this water planet is destroyed, however that happened, by whatever means, whether it was an asteroid impact or a comet or something more science fictiony, the fall of a water planet leads to a deluge on Mars, which is right next door. And there's a big asteroid field now between Mars and Jupiter, and Mars gets absolutely hammered, like the Argyre and the Hellas craters and other craters, that Hancock is pointing out. This is why I say you need to join the dots. The thing about Hancock, he's a very rational source, and he's very thorough and very methodical. The only kind of, I don't even want to say downside, but the only thing with Hancock is that he doesn't really commit to one side or the other. He just presents the evidence and lets you decide. Whereas if you're reading the likes of a Michael Tazarian or a Brian Desborough or a David Icke, they say, this is what happened. And it's very kind of dogmatic almost. Whereas with Hancock, he's like, here's what the science says, this is what the evidence says, and as H.G. Tudor says, go with the evidence, So the thing with Hancock, the reason why I picked him to kind of begin the whole Mars investigation is that he's thorough and methodical, and he doesn't really commit fully to one side or the other. He just presents the evidence and lets you decide, kind of thing. He certainly has his leanings, but he doesn't fully commit. This is definitely what happened. He's not like a Brian Desborough coming out and saying, the Phoenicians came from Mars, and before that they came from the Lydian system, and then, David Icke completely takes that theory and runs with it. The white race came from Mars and all the rest. If you went up to, uh, if you went up to Hancock and said to him, "Do you think the white race came from Mars?" He'd be like, "What? You talking about, mate?" He's because there's no like scientific evidence for it. Really, it's just kind of circumstantial, mythological evidence, kind of thing. It's what the legends kind of hint at or suggest. Because the thing with Hancock is he's only interested in what's concrete. It's time and again he goes with what the NASA scientists are saying, what the geologists are saying. This is what the evidence says, this is what the science says. That's why it's best to begin with Hancock, because he's a very credible source, and he's not got some agenda or some dogma to ram down your throat kind of thing, you know clearly. But the circumstantial evidence, is certainly leaning towards what Michael Tazarian and Lou Baldwin have been saying, that, the planet next to Mars, between Mars and Jupiter, was a water planet. Because if you're talking about massive erosion, and you're talking about flooding, you know, on these planets, Mars and Earth, on a massive scale, 12,500 years ago, then that points to the destruction of a water planet, you know. So, anyway, I'm kind of getting a bit ranty here at the end. Thank you for listening. And as always, leave your thoughts and comments down below. Always interesting to read. Take care.